Hi there. Welcome to Liquidation Preference, the podcast that discusses everything founders need to know about startup law and venture capital over a beverage of our choosing. I'm your host, Andrew Kusmal, and I'm glad you stopped by for a quick drink. Today, we will be discussing mentors, advisors, finders, and predators in the startup world while I enjoy a flavorful IPA. So grab a drink, pull up a seat, and let's get into it.
Today's episode is brought to you by Kusmal Legal, the law firm dedicated to helping founders navigate the legal process of starting, running, and fundraising for a startup. Head on over to kusmallegal.com, that's KUSSMAUL legal.com, to read great material tailored for founders and get help with all your startup's legal needs.
So for today's discussion, I really kind of wanted to round out our previous discussions around starting and forming your startup. In our first discussion, we talked about entity formation and the state you should form in. In our second discussion, we talked about the incorporation process, kind of the documents that go there, the structure of your company. And in this one, like I said, rounding it out with kind of the, for lack of a better word, the support staff that any founder, any startup needs. And that's really when it comes to mentors and advisors. I chose an I.P.A. for today's discussion because they're plentiful, just like mentors and advisors. I mean, every time I go into a liquor store in the beer section, I feel like that's all I see sometimes are just I.P.A.s. And when you go to any sort of startup event or function, there are a ton of people there who can make really good advisors or really good mentors. And just like with any I.P.A., you see that they all of them have a bunch of different flavors, different styles, like a hazy I.P.A., for example. Every single mentor and advisor has their own experience and advice that's unique to them that they can bring to the table. And with like any good I.P.A., they're very enjoyable and powerful. Very similar to a good mentor and advisor. These are people who can really propel your startup, propel your business to that next level, help you out, and they're really enjoyable to work with. You know, you're able to have conversations with them. They know what you're going through, and they say they're going to do something, and they actually do it. So we're going to start with mentors. Now, I think a mentor is essential for any founder, any entrepreneur. When you think of mentor, you have your own description that pops into your head. The one that pops into my head is like an old sage, like Obi-Wan Kenobi teaching a young Luke Skywalker in the ways of the Force. And, while every mentor is different, they do offer and they should bring to the table, advice, that wisdom, like Obi-Wan Kenobi had. They've been there before. They know what you're going through. Someone who can just help you out, provide valuable insight. If you're stuck, they can help you. They can offer some sort of advice. They are also a great confidant and source of support. Let's not kid about it. Being an entrepreneur, being a founder of a startup, it's very stressful. It's very hard, and it can be sometimes depressing. And you need someone who has been in the trenches before, who knows what you're going through, just to be able to vent to sometimes. And of course, you have your family, your loved ones, your friends, and the good ones, they'll listen to you, but they don't really know exactly what you've been through. And I'm not saying don't talk to your friends and family and loved ones about what you're going through. I'm just saying they won't know exactly what you've been through, whereas a mentor will. You can basically call them almost any time in the middle of the night, and they'll pick up your phone, they'll pick up your call and just listen and try to help you get through whatever rough patch that you're going through right now. As I alluded to, or I mentioned earlier with I.P.A.s, mentors, they're everywhere. People who've started 1, 2, 5, 10, 20 successful businesses, they've all been through it before. they're all able to offer some sort of insight, some better than others, of course, but you can find them everywhere in any sort of startup event or function in your local startup community. They're there. You may, now it's funny, you may think that, well, I'm in a small town, or maybe my town doesn't have a startup community. It might, but if it doesn't, I guarantee you the town next over or the bigger town, will definitely go to those events, those functions, and just start talking to people, meeting people. It's a great source of camaraderie. You're going to find other people who are starting businesses just like you, and then you'll be able to find people who've, like I said, been through it before and be able to offer you advice. And it's that offering advice, that's the real important thing here when it comes to mentors and just the startup community in general. It's amazing. Something that I've noticed is a lot of people in the community, 99% of them, operate on like a pay it forward attitude. Everybody wants to see everybody succeed. Everybody wants to help everybody, because when they were just starting out, that's what they got. They people wanted to help them out. People helped them out. People gave them free advice, and they want to pay it forward. And it's great. That's what I love about the startup community. And it's just so inspiring. And any good mentor is just willing to do it for free. They're able to, they'll drop what they're doing and help you out when you need help. And with that being said, there's really, being a lawyer here, talking about agreements and contracts and everything, there's no formal agreement that's ever entered into between a mentor and a founder or an entrepreneur. It's just basically a friendship. Think of it like that. Someone that, like I said, you can talk to at any time, you meet up with for drinks once a week, or just email once a month, give them a call once a month. If you find someone who wants to offer you advice and help you out, but they want something out of it in return, like some sort of compensation, definitely, or equity in the company, definitely, run from that person. Because like I said earlier, most people are willing, pay it forward mentality, willing to do it for free. Now, getting a little bit more formal, outside of mentors, we have advisors. And advisors can be kind of viewed as a type of mentor, right? But typically how I view advisors and how founders should view advisors or find advisors, or who should be their advisor, is an advisor tends to have more industry specific insights, experience, or contacts. Say, for example, you have a biomedical startup. Who are you going to want as an advisor? Like a doctor, for example, someone who's run a biomedical startup before, someone in the medical industry or field, someone who can help your startup navigate that industry, and gain a foothold in the market, where they have a, contacts, being able to help get you that big contract that you need. With advisors, some of them, similar to mentors, do work on a pay it forward mentality. But however, some do want to enter into a more, like a formal agreement, formal arrangement with the startup, and, get some compensation with either a restricted stock grant or stock options. Now, when it comes to how much equity to issue an advisor, I get this question all the time. Andrew, how much, I got this great advisor, how much equity should I give them? It really just, of course, the favorite attorney answer is just, it depends, right? But the typical range that I see is anywhere between 0.1% to 1.5% equity, with 0.25% being the most common and being what's mostly sought by, advisors. Never agree to pay your advisor cash. If an advisor is asking for some sort of salary or some sort of monetary compensation, definitely, again, that's a red flag. Run away from them. Any good advisor worth their salt knows that in the very beginning of startup, you have no money, and you're not going to be able to afford to pay people, a salary. And again, that's something to look out for. If someone wants some sort of monthly stipend or cash payment, definitely they're not for you. When it comes to what's actually in the advisor agreement, they're pretty straightforward. The advisor agreement It spells out the role that the advisor is going to be playing, what they're going to be doing, the level of services, are they going to be committing X hours per month, uh, jump on a call every week. And it's also going to describe, the compensation, what that is, the amount of equity that they're getting, whether it's, like I said, restricted stock or stock options. There are really two important pieces in the advisor agreement that you need to make sure that you have. One is for everyone, every single startup, every single founder needs to make sure that the formal advisor arrangement agreement that you enter into has some sort of NDA provision in it. A lot of advisors are working on various different startups at the same time as helping yours out, and you just want to make sure that that NDA language is in there so they don't disclose any information about your startup to other startups that they're working on who could be potential competitors. The other thing that you need to make sure that's in a startup, and not every single startup needs this, and it just really depends on the advisor and their role, and that's an assignment of inventions provision. If you have a very technical advisor, someone who's really kind of helping you out helping you develop your IP, you're going to want to make sure that that language is in there. So all the IP that, or whatever they developed that went into the product that you're making, belongs to the company, and not to them. With the advisor agreement and the equity that you give them, you're going to want to make sure that that's subject to a vesting schedule. I said last episode, make sure everybody vests. This is very, very true when it comes to advisors as well. However, if you remember in our last discussion, we talked about the typical vesting period for founders being, 4-year period with a 1-year cliff. With advisors, it's a lot shorter with no cliff, thinking, 1 to 2 years, and also having in it what's called single trigger acceleration. Now, what this means is that if the startup is, bought by somebody else before the advisor's shares or equity have fully vested, then they automatically vest at the time of the sell, fully vested, so they get everything that they're owed. Now we're going to talk about finders. And, well, I don't know how else to say this, but finders are people you should typically avoid. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of finders out there in the startup community who are going to be coming after me for saying this. And, the reason why I say avoid them is not because all of them are predators. Some of them definitely are, but because most just don't deliver. Now, if you're new to the startup world and you don't know what a finder is somebody who promises that they'll be able to find you investors. And of course, this is what a lot of young or, naive founders like to hear. Someone who's saying, oh, I have all these investors. I have this whole list of investors, and I guarantee that's the word right there. They guarantee that they're going to be able to find someone to invest in your company. Well, unfortunately, from my experience, that guarantee means nothing. Most of the time, they don't deliver whatsoever. And the interesting thing about finders is that, well, I have clients who say that they found someone who said that they'll be able to find them investors, for a certain percentage. That's, the finders there. That's how they make their money. They want a certain percentage of whatever the total investment amount is. And, I'll ask them, I'll be like, okay, well, is this person a registered broker dealer? And more often than not, the answer is no. And, that's the thing when it comes to finders. They're kind of the startup world's dirty little secret. Maybe not that much of a secret, but how most of them operate. They need to be registered as broker dealers under relevant securities laws. Now, using a finder who isn't a registered broker dealer can have a lot of legal ramifications, for them, of course, and for you. With how the securities laws are structured, I'm not going to dive deep into it. Maybe I will do some securities laws discussions later on if people really want to fall asleep. But the whole essence of it is if you use a finder to find investors who isn't a registered broker dealer, and those people invest in your startup. Those investors have the right to rescind their investment at any time and demand full payment of it back. You know, as any true good startup will do, of course, once you get that investment money, you're already spending it. You're spending it on R&D or marketing, and it's already gone. This can really put you in a bind where you're legally obligated to pay back the full amount that they invested, like $250,000, for example, and it can really bankrupt. It can bankrupt your startup and end it right there. Also, too, you could be subjected to some sort of legal action around securities laws violations there, helping out with that. With that being said, using a finder can also blow up future deals when it comes to VCs. Now, when you're raising your money, again, I'm going to lightly touch on securities laws here, so bear with me. You have to file what's called a Form D with the SEC. And on this Form D, you have to list anyone who is getting any sort of commission from the investment. And of course, most finders, that's what they do. They want a commission from the investment, so you have to list them on there. Well, when a VC is doing their due diligence, their attorneys are going to pour through any previous Form D filings that you've done, if you've done any, and they're going to see that person listed on that section. They're going to look into it, and they're going to see that they're not a registered broker-dealer. And because of the issues that I just described with it bankrupting the startup and the potential legal liability, they're not going to want to invest. Most of the times they're probably going to pull out once they find that, because they know, well, what they don't want is they don't want the money that they're investing in your startup to be able to go to pay some other previous investor the amount back of their investment, right? They don't want it to go into the startup and then you have to pay that previous investor, because that previous investor, has buyer's remorse, and you're legally obligated to pay them back the full amount that they invested. That VCs want that money that they're investing in your startup to go towards your startup, to go towards the product, help the company grow, to reach that exit, so everybody, exits happy with a lot of money. And then, of course, there are finders who just are predators, and you'll know these people when you see them, or when you hear what they want in return, I should say, because they'll want a ridiculous amount of money compensation or some form of equity. I've come across people who wanted like 10% equity from a company just for finding investors, things like that. Those are definitely red flags, things to run away from. Now, speaking of predators, there are many predators in the startup community. That's just the unfortunate reality of it. I mentioned earlier, they do prey on young or naive founders. And you can really tell who these people are by how they act. They have a lot of, they're cocky, right? Their confidence is one thing, but these people are really cocky. They're sometimes charismatic, kind of very loud. They're boastful, boasting about all the successes they had and everything. Most of that's bullshit. And they try to confuse you in a way of like how smart they are by throwing out a bunch of big terms, things that words you may not know, talking about, how to raise investment funds and processes that seem really, really confusing. And it's just all to cover up the fact that they don't know what they're doing and they just want to get money out of you. You really do get a gut feeling with these people when you meet them. And if you don't, any good startup attorney or mentor or advisor, be able to warn you about them just by how they act. Most of the time, another key tell is, they try to sell you on something that they can do for your startup, some service that they operate, oh yeah, well, pay us this much money and we can do this for your startup and blah, blah, blah. Or they ask for a ridiculous amount of equity. And again, those are types of red flags. Again, a good mentor, or advisor, or startup attorney can tell you to run away from these people. I've had several clients who've come in contact with predators, and I've come in contact with a few predators in the startup, community. And every single one of my clients who's come into contact one, at the end of the day, they're always like, what? I had a gut feeling about that person. There's something just didn't sit right, but I just, use them anyways. And that's really, really important when it comes to choosing, a mentor or an advisor. You're pouring your heart and soul into your startup. You want to make sure that you have a good feeling about the person who's going to be, working closely with it or helping you. And if you don't have that gut feeling, or if you have that feeling like, yeah, something's wrong, something's off, just leave, just walk away, find someone else. Like I said, with I.P.As, good mentors good mentors and advisors. There's plenty of them out there. And last thing, while these predators, they may promise, powerful results, just like a bad I.P.A, all they're going to do is just leave you with a bad taste in your mouth and a pounding headache. Well, I wish I could order another round with you, but unfortunately it's time to go. If you'd like to learn more about what was discussed today, head on over to my blog at kusmalllegal.com. That's KUSSMAUL legal.com. Also be sure to follow me on Twitter at Tech Startup Attorney. That's attorney spelled ATTY. And on Clubhouse at Startup Attorney and Instagram at startup_attorney. I hope you enjoyed our time together, your beverage of choice, and that you learned something useful. More importantly, I hope you enjoyed this much-needed break from running your startup. Being a founder is stressful, and it's important to take breaks every once in a while. While you're always taking care of your startup, you shouldn't forget to take care of yourself. See you next time.
Everything discussed in this episode is purely educational in nature and should not be interpreted in any way as legal advice specific to your startup. If you have any questions about what was discussed on today's show and how it pertains to your startup or situation, please consult with your legal counsel.